Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here along with Nick Whalen on this fine Tuesday in the association, day after a full day of NBA. Much to break down here. We're going to get to your questions and some players that you need to add to your roster. Not tomorrow, not the next day, today. You need to go and get them. Yesterday was a loaded slate. I always love MLK Day in the NBA. You get those staggered 30-minute starts to start off the day. How about this one as I pat myself on the back to start today's episode? I tweeted this one out, so if you're following along at Brandon Kravitz, this isn't me just saying this after the fact, so hopefully some of you were on this also. But I said early starts for these guys, probably not going to be a lot of points. I went first 4 games, just took the under across the board, 4-0. And if you did that over the whole day, I think you only had one loss. There's a lot of unders in the NBA yesterday.
Yeah, I think, was it Jazz-Pelicans would have been the only over, and we had a big total in that game. And CJ McCollum was pretty much the single reason that this game ended up going over, and the single reason that the Pelicans ended up winning in overtime. I mean, New Orleans
was the only one. You're right. That was the only over that hit yesterday.
Yeah, and that total like it was in the 230s, right? I want to say it was like 236 or even maybe a little higher.
Yeah, it was 230.5 is what it closed at.
Okay, 230.5. All right. Well, yeah. So I mean, obviously overtime, kind of hammered that home for you. But this was a vintage modern day Utah Jazz loss where they were up 38-19 at the end of the first quarter. I mean, this was a 20-point lead for much of the first half. And yeah, as we've seen the Jazz do plenty of times, draft pick preservation, I believe, is at the top of mind already for this Utah team. I'm not saying they lost this game on purpose, but I don't think the front office is throwing up its hands and saying, "Oh, I can't believe this. Oh man, we have to add another loss to our ledger." No, we have a better chance at landing Cooper Flag. I think they're okay with this, but I mean, just an incredible performance from McCollum, who for the most part had been kind of off the last couple of weeks. He's mixed in a couple of good games, but it had some really bad performances. 45 points, 8 rebounds, 18 of 31 from the field on a night when the Pelicans, didn't have Zion, didn't really get a whole lot else. DeJounte Murray was really off for most of the game, ended up finishing with 26, 11, and 9, but a lot of that came later. Trey Murphy, played okay, but that was really about it. Those three, carried the day for the Pels. I do want to talk about on the Utah side, though, Isaiah Collier, somebody I put some bids on over the weekend and probably still out there in a lot of leagues. I mean, he was just claimed this week in our 16-team league at RotoWire, which tends to be pretty competitive. And he went for $29, which at this point in the season, that was a lot. I mean, I think I bid like $8 thinking that I was maybe going too high, and I only have like $50 left out of a $100 budget. $29, but 20 points, 11 assists for him. You're going to have to worry about the field goal percentage. If you're in a category league, maybe that matters for you. Maybe it doesn't. But he's been on a nice little run here. Double-digit assists now in 3 straight games.
Amazing. This was Bronny's teammate at USC, and right. He has definitely been the better NBA player. Well, he's been an NBA player.
He was the number 1 player in his class, too. I mean, this is not shocking.
No, this is also why that USC team probably shouldn't have been a lot better than they were, but he's been getting a lot of run lately. You look over the last month, he's played at least 20-plus minutes in every game but one. And I mean, and it was starting to ramp up even prior to that, but he's a big physical body. Kind of feels like somebody outside of perhaps the 3-point shooting, which he just doesn't really jack up a lot of threes anyway, but the percentage isn't there either. Kind of feels like somebody that would play for the Thunder based on his stockiness and athleticism. He's got that sort of build to him. And for a Jazz team that has no reason to do anything but look at young guys, there's no reason to think that Collier won't be a part of the mix moving forward.
Yeah, no question. And I think you're right, by the way. He does seem like he would be one of those Thunder finds of like, how do we let the Thunder get this guy?
But if OKC had him, he would be shooting at least 42% from 3.
Yeah, he'd be averaging like 2.5 steals. But it's pretty rare at this point in the season to have someone emerge who's like a double-digit assist guy. I mean, it's hard to find like any assists on the waiver wire, let alone, even like 5 or 6 assists per game. And Collier's basically giving you double that. It's hard to project this going forward. It's worth noting that yesterday the Jazz were without Markkanen, Collins, Sexton, who's now rested 2 of the last 3 games, just straight up rest. And, I know
I think we know what that is.
Well, the schedule's been a part of that, and potentially the trade deadline as well. I think Sexton's going to be gone. I've been saying that for weeks. I did a video for our YouTube channel last week saying just try to get off him. He's been really good, and I think he'll continue to be good wherever he lands, but he's not going to have a 25% usage rate. He's maybe not going to play that number of minutes. I think a lot of teams view him as a high-end six man. If he's going to wherever he goes, it's going to be a significantly better basketball situation, but he's been like the number one option for the Jazz on a lot of nights because Markkanen's missed so much time. Collins has missed so much time. Keontae George even has been in and out. Wherever he lands, he's probably going to be like the third or fourth option at best.
Yeah, but I would also think that whoever adds him needs his scoring. So I don't think he'll fall off a complete cliff. And it's better than what you're getting right now, which is a guy that's not active. So I think I would hold out some hope on Collin Sexton.
Well, it's not like I'm dropping him. It's more so like I would look to trade him while I can. I mean, that window, if people are paying attention, maybe that window is closed. It's just like, I think the rest of the season, you look at his numbers now, like, does he have that ceiling wherever he lands? 18, the counting stats aren't that good, right? 18, 4 assists and like 3 rebounds. He doesn't give you any steals. He doesn't give you blocks. He doesn't shoot that many threes, but I think we're looking at like, 80% of that, maybe he could give you the rest of the year. But if you could trade that for a better player, I would rather do that.
So who do we think it looks like Collin Sexton is going to be traded.
Yeah.
He's a hot candidate for it. What he brings to the table, a lot of teams need this time of year, and the Jazz are effectively shutting him down. So this guy's going to be moved. Where does he get moved? Who do you think who makes sense as a buyer in the Sexton market? Is I think if you're able to brainstorm a couple of teams and then project what that looks like, we might get a better idea of whether he is a buy, sell, or a hold.
Well, he's not making that much money. I think you look at this year, he's making like 18.3, next year 19.1, and then he's an unrestricted free agent in the summer of 26, which like seems like a lot, but in the current NBA, that's just not really that much. So you're not talking about bringing in one of these guys who's making 50 million. It's like most teams could probably find a way to bring in Collin Sexton. So I think there will actually be quite a bit of interest in him. It's hard to say off the top of my head. It's like who could officially get that done, but it's like the New York Knicks, for example, could certainly use his another scorer.
Then I would agree with you there. His value would fall off a cliff.
Yeah, well, it's like the Knicks, the Pacers. You can name like any team in the East, right? The Hawks, the Magic, Miami. He kind of seems like a Miami type of guy to me. Detroit, could use a guard with Ivy going down. In the West, I think there are a number of teams as well. I mean, Memphis has some pieces they could cobble together. I think he'd make a great Houston Rocket as a 6-man. The Clippers, if they kind of want to go for it, I mean, they're sitting as a 5 seed right now in the West, and of course, the Lakers are the team that he's probably been linked to the most.
Well, see, and I think there are a couple of teams there where we're going to have a different conversation about him. If he lands on the Magic or the Clippers, 2 teams that really could use his scoring, I think he's still going to put up some pretty good numbers on those teams because they're sort of desperate for exactly that. If he ends up on one of these teams where he's a potent 6th man on a team that isn't really having trouble filling it up, like Indiana, like the Knicks, then I agree with you. What I would say is perhaps he's the kind of guy you want to hold on to until the day he gets traded. And then I always like cashing in on the buzz of a guy that's getting headlines. And it feels like Sexton could be one of the top 3 biggest names that we see on deadline day. I wonder if you time it just right, if you can get more bang for your buck with Sexton.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't try to trade him like right now when he's rested 2 of the last 3 games. Definitely do it like after he's played. And he's been super consistent. Like when he plays, he gives you like 20 to 25 points every single night. So, especially the last couple of weeks, he's been on a nice heater. But yeah, I mean, it depends. I would try to get it done sooner than later personally, because I think the chances that he lands in an equal or better situation are very slim.
Real quick before we move off of that game completely, the Pelicans are an interesting case.
Yeah,
I wonder what they're up to here because they've been pretty good lately. They've won 4 straight. They're 7-3 in their last 10, all coinciding with Zion's return to some degree. they still have one of the worst records in the NBA. I can't tell if they're in the lottery sweepstakes or if this is a team that actually wants to see what they have. What's your read on how they progress moving forward with their pieces?
I think the answer is somehow both, because like mathematically, I think they're out of it. I know, like you said, they're 7-3. They've been on like a decent run here, but I mean, they're still 9 games out of the 10 seed, and that we just don't have that much time. We're past the midway point in the season for a lot of teams. I mean, they've played 44 out of 82 games already, and like that's a lot of ground to make up, and especially in the West, where like in the Eastern Conference, for example, it's like you could see, Chicago, for example, is the 10 right now. Then like they could sell off and fall back. Like the teams that they're chasing, Sacramento, Minnesota, Phoenix, Golden State, even the Spurs, like those teams are all going for it. I don't think those teams are going to be backing out by any means. So I think New Orleans simultaneously wants to see what this group looks like. Obviously, they're a much better team than the record indicates because of all these injuries, but I also don't think they have a realistic chance to actually emerge from the lottery. So it could go either way. I mean, I think Brandon Ingram is still the guy they would probably be most likely to trade, but he's got to play at some point. He hasn't played in like a month plus. I don't know if he's going to be back before the deadline at this point. I mean, they're starting to kind of handle this on a more day-to-day basis. If they can audition him for even a week and a half and he looks okay, maybe he could be traded. But I think if you're New Orleans, you try to take a step back and say, yeah, the season's been a disaster. Our record is brutal. But if we had our guys, we would probably be somewhere in that like 6 to 10 range, as opposed to sitting in 13th or 14th in the West.
What about a higher range in the Western Conference? The Suns are an even 500 right now, 21-21. They were brutal without Kevin Durant earlier in the season. They got absolutely smacked by the Cleveland Cavaliers, and that could very well just be a Cavs thing. But I've noticed this with Phoenix over the course of the season. Their offense is good statistically, but man, when they fall flat and hard. The Suns rank 11th overall in offensive rating. They are 11th in three-point shooting frequency and 6th in percentage, which all of those numbers surprised me. Maybe I'm making too much of it, but it feels like that's a team that would have to do something if they wanted to be more competitive. And I think a better fit for the stars that they have, they just don't feel like they flow offensively to me.
No, I mean, the Beal thing has obviously been a disaster. He gave them 5 points on 4 shots in 25 minutes yesterday. Obviously they made a move last week. Not a super impactful move, but Nick Richards, is in the starting lineup. He started yesterday against the Cavs. If that's their big move, then I don't know if that's necessarily going to be enough. I mean, everybody knows like the Suns would like to do something. It's just they're pretty handicapped by the Beal situation and the no trade clause. It's like, even if he were to waive that, which I think for certain situations, maybe he'd be open to, like, whatever team is trading for him, like the no trade clause doesn't go away. Like he can waive it for that specific deal, but it's still a part of his contract. And the team bringing him in, then kind of inherits that burden of, all right, if we want to move off of Brad Beal, then we have to go through this same negotiation process. So like, he's the one guy that they would move. Like, I don't think they would trade Durant. I don't think they would trade Booker. They're kind of all in on those two. And like, even if you could find a team to take Beal, I think one, he hasn't been that good. So he's not worth, what you thought he would be worth when you brought him in. And I think you're paying a tax on the no trade clause, because whatever team is bringing that in is saying, look, we're taking on this risk that this guy's going to be stuck on our roster. We're not going to give you, our A+ asset package for this guy. So it wouldn't shock me, I guess, if they were able to trade him, but I think the return would end up being pretty underwhelming.
Just goes to show there's nothing more damaging to your team in the NBA than a bad contract. It's been that way for years.
There are 2 players in the NBA with a no trade clause: Bradley Beal and LeBron James.
Wow,
that's not how it should go. That's not how it should go.
That's hilarious. The Warriors lost by 40 yesterday. They did so without Draymond Green. Said yesterday that we had an MRI result as only a minor strain, but he's going to be reevaluated in a week. He got hurt in the first quarter in that win over Washington on Saturday. I guess Gary Payton II is a guy that we're interested in, but what do you make of the Warriors, their bad play yesterday, and then what do you do from a fantasy lens as it pertains to replacing Draymond?
The Warriors are just kind of stuck here, to be honest. I think, they on paper they have a package that they could put together if they really wanted to. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. We got the comments from Steph last week just kind of indicating that he's kind of aware of where they stand. And, ideally, yeah, you'd bring in somebody, but he also kind of gets that, there's not really an obvious move. And, I think it's certainly beneficial to the Warriors that Steph is Steph, and is not the type of guy who's going to force something just to try to maximize one season. Where I think the writing is on the wall that your ceiling is not all that high. So my guess is I've heard from some people that they think if anything the Warriors could end up being like mild sellers as far as I think they have to clear I think it's like $6 or $8 million to get under the luxury tax this season. I think we could see that at the deadline. The Kuminga, Moody, Pajemski, Wiggins, like all these guys I think could be available. But again, what are you getting? I don't know. Is that package getting you Jimmy Butler? Maybe. Does Jimmy Butler save this season for the Warriors? I don't think he does. And, as far as Draymond goes, they said he's going to miss at least a week. So he's going to miss at least, 4 games or so. With the All-Star break coming up, with it being a calf injury, something that you can re-aggravate pretty easily. I don't know when we're going to see him. And I mean, they got problems all over. Like obviously that kills them defensively. And, offensively, it's Steph and everybody else right now. I mean, Schroeder's been a disaster. Wiggins went 1 of 11 from the field yesterday. You look at some of the names who are playing off the bench for them. I mean, these are guys that a lot of people haven't heard of. Guy Santos played 27 minutes yesterday. Lindy Waters, Quentin Post, Pat Spencer. These are guys who played double-digit minutes. I know it was a 40-point loss, but the Warriors are just nowhere close to contending for a title.
That would have been a great year for them to enter the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, but they'll be just good enough to completely avoid that. And you're right about Steph. Not only is he not the type to be a diva and force the issue, he actually came out and said he doesn't want them to do anything that damages the Warriors in the future. It almost sounds like Steph is setting himself up to be president of basketball operations in the future.
It's admirable, man. I mean, he's the best teammate I think that we've seen in a while. I think the Tim Duncan type of comparisons are apt in this situation. It's fascinating to think about them potentially moving off of Steph at some point. I don't think that would happen this year, but I don't know that the Warriors have a clear path to being like significantly better next year. We'll see. Somebody will probably shake free this offseason and maybe they can get their hat in the ring, but I think it's more realistic than ever that he could have a last phase of his career somewhere else.
It would have to come from Steph because he's just been too good to that organization for them to move off of him.
Yeah. And it's hard to imagine Steph, forcing his way out. I think it would be almost this mutual acknowledgement of like, hey, I'm the guy that you guys can get the most assets for. I would like to finish my career in a competitive situation. It's still probably more likely that he just plays out the string in Golden State, but it feels possible.
Let's talk about the emergence of one Scoot Henderson over his last 4 games, 25 points per game, 8 assists, steal and a half, 57% from the field, 53% from deep. This guy couldn't shoot a year ago. Hell, he couldn't shoot a month ago. Now all of a sudden he's red hot, scoring into the 30s regularly. What do you make of Scoot and his explosion as of late? Is this a blip or has he unlocked something?
It's a great question. It's the question of our time right now, I think, in the fantasy world. And shout out to our guy James Chan, who just said Scoot in the chat. He started 3 of the last 4 games. Simons did not play on Sunday, but Simons had played in the previous 3 games, and Scoot has seen 30+ minutes in all 4 of those. The 3-point shooting is the big thing. He's been getting to the line quite a bit as well, but knocking those down. It's kind of been a shaky-ish free throw shooter throughout his career so far. But, it's not just the scoring. It could just be kind of a hot run for him as far as that goes. But, he's giving you steals. He's giving you assists. He's rebounding as well. 25 points, 8 assists, 1.5 steals over these last 4 games. I was a little skeptical, after the Brooklyn game where he put up 39 in an 18-point loss to a team that then turned around and scored like 67 points a night later. But, he had a solid game against the Clippers. He had a good game against Houston. Chicago obviously is a team to target. 25, 7, and 8 for him on Sunday. So, two of these games came against terrible teams. Two of these games came against good teams. If he's out there in your league, I think you absolutely got to ride this. You got to pick him up. I mean, there's not really anybody else out there who has this kind of ceiling. And, the pedigree that Scoot came in with, like, this is, more in line with what we expected. So it's been a weird start to his career. It kind of looked like this was going really, really south, earlier this season. But, Portland's in a spot where they should want to feature him, as far as the level of investment goes. I think you got to kind of ride this out. So if he's out there in a league that I'm playing in, I'm grabbing him.
I still can't believe he attempted 10 threes in a game. This is a guy that couldn't shoot a year ago. Right. And you had that game against Brooklyn. Not only did he attempt 10, he made 8 of them. If you had told me after the game, or before the game rather, that Scoot Henderson was going to go 8 of 10 from 3-point range, I think I would have put my life savings on Portland to win that game. So glad I don't know this information ahead of time. But you're right. How do you not take a stab on this guy? I was all in on Scoot last year. It did nothing for me in fantasy. I was just I was a year too excited about this guy. Wow. But it seems like this feels like the emergence. Even if he's not going to give you this, I mean, these percentages are ridiculous. But he's not going to. The deal with him last year and for portions of this year is that not only was he not helping you, he was actually hurting you. And if you can at least get past the he's hurting you part with his upside, that's the kind of player that you want to roster. So I'm back in on Scoot.
Yeah, I think, if you're in a category league, the turnovers are going to be an issue. I still think the efficiency will be an issue, but there's a lot of builds where you're punting one or both of those categories, and I think you could totally buy in here. I mean, he's raised his season-long 3-point percentage by over 5 percentage points in the last week.
Yeah, crazy. A couple of other players that you want to stop what you're doing and add right now. How about a name like, we mentioned Gary Payton II. I mean, he's stepping in for Draymond Green. Is that somebody that you're excited to add, or you just not want much of this Warriors roster?
You got to be, I think, realistic with Gary Payton. Like, even when he's been a starter in the past, like, he's never like this high minute guy. Obviously, again, 40-point blowout yesterday, so can't take too much from that. But he started and played 12 minutes. I'm looking at we'll just pull the 11 games this season in which he's played more than 15 minutes. He's averaging 6 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 steal. He doesn't shoot threes. He's, just not a high volume offensive player. If you're really desperate for steals in a deep league, that's really all I would look for, but not a ton of interest in him. I guess, in a roundabout way, Trace Jackson Davis maybe benefits a little bit without Draymond. We could see some more Kevon Looney, who you're really just targeting for rebounds at this point. But, Draymond's not, this high output statistical guy. So it's not like you're removing 20 points and 10 rebounds every single night.
What about Robert Williams of the Blazers? This is a guy that could be on the move soon. If you're a lip reader, Ime Udoka made it pretty clear that Houston wants to go after this guy. I'd be very intrigued by Robert Williams playing consistent minutes with the Houston Rockets.
He's got to stay healthy. I mean, he missed their last game with an ankle injury. I think that was the lip reading that was done. When Udoka talked to him, he said, we're going to come get you and got to stay healthy. I mean, that's obviously the big caveat with Williams is, can he actually stay healthy? Would he, would he see enough minutes in Houston? Maybe, I mean, it's kind of just been the Şengün show at center. They have some small ball options behind him. I think, if they made a point to trade for him, he's going to be in the rotation. And I think the thing with Williams is he doesn't necessarily need a ton of minutes. Like, if he could just play like 15 to 20 minutes, which probably seems like the max, you're still looking at high volume rebounds. You're looking at some blocks. So yeah, I think if you're in a 14 or a 16 team league and you're trying to make your list of like speculative pre-trade deadline ads, I think he's worth targeting.
Another name to the list, one of my guys, Cole Anthony. He has some interesting matchups this week. If he's still available for you and you can add him, Raptors, Blazers, Pistons this week. So not only do you get multiple games, you get multiple games with really good matchups. I was looking at before we hopped on, what opposing guards do to the Toronto Raptors. Cole Anthony over 15.5 points tonight, by the way, might be added to the betting portfolio for the night before we are off of this podcast. But what do you think about Cole Anthony as an ad? This Jalen Suggs injury is lingering a lot longer than I thought it would.
Yeah, I think the way Alex and I talked about it, I can't remember if this was on the pod or if it was on our NBA show last week, is as long as Suggs is out, absolutely. I mean, this is as close to like a 1-to-1 as it gets, where it's like once Suggs is back, I'm probably not all that interested in Cole Anthony, but as long as he's out, and I mean, you might know better than me. I mean, this has been what, 2.5 weeks now, and still not.
We don't have a timeline on this, so
yeah. I mean, they haven't given us the like he's out for at least a week. It's just kind of game to game, but he doesn't seem all that close. As long as he's out, I mean, Cole Anthony has given you 16, 5, and 5 basically with a steal and some threes. So absolutely should be rostered. I mean, as far as that points prop goes, I mean, he's, what was it, 15.5?
Yeah.
I mean, he's averaging like almost 15 shots per game with Suggs out this season. So, there's still been some nights where he'll, go 4 of 13 or 5 of 17, but he's getting shots up.
I'm going to go ahead and we'll get that in before we get off. You don't want the numbers moving on you over here. One more name, and then we're going to get to your questions on the other side of the bounce. How do we feel about a 31-year-old Spencer Dinwiddie? The minutes creeping up into the 30s with Luka still on the shelf, and it looks like Luka's going to be on the shelf for another couple of weeks. So is this somebody you want to add to the roster?
Yeah, this is another one I think that is pretty tethered specifically to Luka. They gave us the 1 month timeline on Christmas, and we haven't heard much since. So obviously we're coming up on almost exactly a month, but we're also coming up on the All-Star break. So we'll see on Luka. With Dinwiddie, when the minutes are there, the production tends to swing wildly night to night. He's one of those guys that'll give you 20 points and 4 threes, and then the next night he'll give you like 7 points and 3 assists, and that's that. So you got to be able to kind of stomach the good and the bad. But on balance, since Luka went out, we're looking at about 14 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal. The field goal percentage is never going to be good. He's always like 39, 40%. So that's something you have to take into account. But, finding counting stats like that, in a deeper league is not easy. So he should at least be rostered, I think, as long as Luka's out.
Let's get to your questions. It's time for the bounce. Wrapped today's episode, this Tuesday episode, as we do with your questions on our tab over here. Oh, you already gave me the scoot. Not a question, but a great comment. P-Dub says, thoughts on a 10-team 9-cat league offered Zubac for Amen Thompson for my Jalen Johnson. So it's Zubac and Amen Thompson for Jalen Johnson. They're returning Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, this is a really interesting trade. I mean, I really wouldn't want to get off of Amen. He feels like one of the most fun players to roster right now in fantasy. And I mean, you just look at the sheer minutes. Like, he's averaging like 40 minutes per game over the last couple of weeks. And obviously, Tari Eason's continued absence is a part of that. So he's giving you like 17, 11, 4, 2.5 steals, 1.3 blocks. I mean, that's pretty outrageous. The one thing he doesn't give you is threes, and he's a bad free throw shooter, and he actually takes a decent amount. So a lot of this depends on your category needs, of course. As much as I love Jalen Johnson, I think I might just want the Zubac and Amen. Like, those, Zubac is just so solid every single night. You know exactly what you're getting. Good field goal percentage, points, rebounds. There's a ceiling there, of course, but he's having a great year. I don't think that's changing. The Clippers have been a lot better than I thought they would be. And, Amen is just ridiculous right now, man. Again, if you can stomach the bad free throw shooting and the lack of threes, I would rather have the 2 side of this, but this is a pretty fair deal. I mean, Jalen Johnson is the best player in the deal.
And in a 10-team league, you generally want to stack your team with as many of the best players as you can. Yeah. But I think I'm with you that combination seems pretty attractive.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I'll say, sorry, I didn't see it was 10-team league at first. I mean, I guess with it being a shallower league, like, are you for sure starting Zubac every week? Like, if this is one of those leagues where most teams are pretty stacked and maybe Zubac does kind of end up being a borderline guy, then I would think about it, because Jalen Johnson is the more well-rounded of this group. But I still think I would rather have Zubac and Thompson.
All right, let's get Kool-Aid Trippin' in there. Great handle. Sure. Rest of season, Tumani Camara or Ausar Thompson. We're talking about the other twin here. This is a 14-teamer, 9-cat. So we got a lot of Got a lot of shallow rosters in this league.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I I don't know, man. I mean, Camara has scored 0 points in 2 of his last 3 games, despite playing like big minutes in both of those games. I mean, he started every game he's played this year for the Blazers, who've just been a weird rotation. Someone like Avdia obviously has not been as impactful as we thought he might be. Jeremy Grant's now back in the mix. Who knows what that really means? I I think Camara has probably been the better player so far, but I think I trust Ausar a little bit more going forward. He's been starting as well, but the minutes have been kind of capped in the low 20s, which has been frustrating. I think there's just kind of a more defined role for him in Detroit the rest of the way. Whereas with Portland, I mean, nothing would really surprise you with that rotation night to night.
Yeah, I think if you were just comparing the game logs of the two players, Camara is going to impress you more than Thompson. But to Nick's point, we're projecting moving forward, and you feel like you know what you're going to get out of Thompson. You know what the quality of player that he is, and it feels like the bottom could just fall out for Camara at any point. Yeah. That's generally the point that you're trying to make.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, the ceiling's not that high for Camara. It's just, like I said, with Portland, anything is possible. That they're certainly a team that could make some trades, and that they could bring in pieces that could threaten his role. Whereas I think Detroit is just a little bit more projectable the rest of the way.
Let's talk about some big men in the NBA: Rudy Gobert or Jakob Poeltl and Kel'el Ware in a 12-team league.
That is interesting. I don't have a lot of Poeltl, unfortunately, this year. He's been really good, and Khalil Ware's coming off a 25 and 8 with a couple blocks the other night.
This is not a 1-for-1, by the way. So it would be you're either trading Gobert or Poeltl for Ware. You can pick one.
Right. If I was going to make that deal, I think it would have to be Gobert. The statistical upside for him has just not been that high. He's still hanging around like 1.5 blocks on a lot of nights. He was brutal yesterday, and their loss to Memphis was like 105 from the field, just missed like a ton of layups. And, they almost go out of their way, it feels like, to not feature him. I still think both Poeltl and Gobert are more bankable assets. It depends where you are in your league. Like if you're doing well, if you're in like the top half, you got a chance to win it, I would probably just play it safe. If you need to shake things up and you're like, I need something here, I would say that's a little more justifiable. But Khalil Ware over the last 11 games, which is really when he's kind of been bigger into the rotation, 12 points, 6 rebounds, 1.4 blocks. I guess he gives you some threes, which Gobert doesn't. But we're not. I still wonder, how high the ceiling is here. There's been a lot of nights where he's still playing like 15 minutes a game. So the way I tend to play fantasy, I'd probably not make this deal, but if you're going to trade one of them, it would be Gobert.
Ware has been a really good draft pick. I know there were a lot of draft skeptics around Ware and his ability to shine in the NBA, and he
went to a good spot.
Well, yeah, getting drafted by Miami never hurts. Joel Embiid, this James wants to know: is Joel Embiid done? Or he actually it looks like more of a statement. I think James is breaking news here, Sham style. Embiid is done. Yabusele a hold for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So Yabusele's been kind of inconsistent, but I mean, the Embiid thing it's a disaster. Obviously, we'll see him again at some point this year, but if you're in a weekly lineup league, I mean, how often are you going to be comfortable locking in Joel Embiid, just not knowing, if it's a 4-game week, maybe you get 3 games, maybe you get 2, maybe you get 0. I wanted nothing to do with Embiid this year. And, that's been one of my few good calls, I suppose. I mean, Andre Drummond has missed a ton of time as well. And that's certainly helped Yabusele. I think Yabusele is just a pretty good player, right? I mean, we saw it in the Olympics, right? I think that was actually a pretty shrewd signing, I thought, by the Sixers. And unfortunately, we haven't got to see him shine all that much because the team's been so bad. But yeah, I think to kind of answer the question here, Yabusele is a hold. You'd like him to give you a little bit more defensively, but yeah, you can live with 12 points, 5.5 rebounds, couple assists, couple of threes. And, again, you could make the argument, I guess, that this has been like a worst case scenario first half for Embiid, and like chances are he plays more games over the second half. But what I mean, if I gave you over under 20 games played for Embiid the rest of the season, I don't know how you confidently say over on that.
No. If I gave you, how about this one? I asked this on my show in Orlando yesterday. If I gave you over under 39 and a half games played as his average over the next 5 seasons, what would you take?
Wait, sorry, what was the number?
So it's 39 and a half. I got that number because he played 39 last year. He's not going to, I don't know that, I don't think he gets to 39 this year, but if next 5 years after this season, if you were to average out his next 5 seasons over or under 39 and a half games played.
It's probably right around that number, to be honest. I mean, big man with the injury history that he has, like, does it get better as you
just
get into
has
your 30s?
Random knee swelling? This is not good. He didn't even injure his knee. It was a foot sprain, and he has knee swelling now. So I think James is right. I think Embiid is done. How about this one from Lucas? I'm not sure that I love the wording here. Points league, which would you drop, Giannis or Wemby? I wouldn't drop either of those guys. I'm hoping that you mean in a trade.
Yeah, definitely don't drop either of them. I don't really know how to answer this. I mean, they're both.
If you were to trade and just try and get top dollar on one of the top guys in basketball, which would you say? Somehow you have both of these guys. Which one would you want to part ways with for the?
I guess
either.
Giannis in the scoring that we use on our site, Giannis has actually been the better player in points leagues by a couple points. So I guess I'll just default to that and say Wembanyama. But I wouldn't be looking to get off of either of these guys. Like the only player who's giving you more production than either of them, and in a points league is Jokic. So I don't really know how this trade would benefit you, or how you even have both on your roster.
Yeah, that part. It sounds like you might be over trading at this point. Dylan says, how do you feel about trading Bane and Poole for Austin Reaves and Anthony Edwards, 12-team 9-cat?
Yeah. I think on the surface I like this.
Yeah, I do too.
Bane has kind of had his ups and downs. Poole's been I think a lot better than you might think, just because he's been dragged into the mud that is the Wizards. Bane's been on a nice run. He went through a pretty rough stretch in November and December where you're kind of wondering what's wrong with him. But last 15 games, he's given you 21, 5, and 6 with 1.9 steals, 3 threes per game. So he's actually been better than Reaves, and Reaves has been really good lately too. I still, you're getting the best player in the deal though in Edwards. The Timberwolves are just tough to watch, but Edwards is still getting his numbers. So getting off of like just the general risk of the Wizards, I don't think Poole's necessarily a shutdown guy because they're bad enough with him. But I think he got a little more security in the Reaves and Edwards side of things. So like if you could just trade like Poole for Reaves, I would do that, because Bane's been really good. But yeah, I think if it's gun to my head, I would make this deal. I'd take Reaves and Edwards.
All right. Well, no one's going to put you in that. That's a precarious situation to find yourself in with the gun to your head on a fantasy deal.
Not a gun guy.
All right. How about Johnny offered Cade Cunningham for Damian Lillard in a 9-cat league? Should I take it? I think you have to, right?
Well, yeah, Lillard's actually been the better player so far in terms of value. He's actually played fewer games and he's given you better production. Part of it is the turnovers are a much bigger issue for Cade. So that might be the difference maker. I'm trying to run it.
He just does more. Lillard crushes the percentages, the points.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I just ran the numbers. If you take turnovers out of it, Cade is the better player. If you include turnovers, our site is telling me Lillard's the better player. So I think that might be the category that hinges it. Are you punting turnovers? Are you okay with incurring more turnovers? Yeah. This is really tough. I love both of these guys. Cade feels like the more fun player to roster the rest of the way, to be honest. So yeah, why not? Let's pull the trigger.
All right. Yeah, let's have some fun. It's 2025. Let's wrap with Michael, who says, should I drop D'Lo for Isaiah Collier? Just and end the show the way we started it, talking about the big beefy rookie for the Utah Jazz.
I still think there's probably a little bit more security with D'Lo, which sounds crazy because it's D'Lo, but it really depends on how aggressive the Nets are in full on tanking and potentially resting him down the stretch. I think they've they've done a hell of a job over the last month of backing their way, out of the play-in zone, but they still got a lot of work to do if they want to get into that bottom four, because you got, the Pelicans, the Jazz, Toronto, Washington, Charlotte. I do think the Hornets will probably actually pass up the Nets pretty easily. But I think for like the next month or two, I'd rather have D'Lo. I very much worry about how many games he's going to play, when we get to late March and April.
That'll do it for us this week on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Of course, you can check back more episodes from our variety of analysts, 4 episodes per week. So we hit every single topic, all of the players that are on all of your rosters. I've been your host, Brandon Kravitz. He's Nick Whalen. Till next time, Fantasy Fiends.